My husband and I never thought that house hunting would wreck our lives, but here we are, 6 months later, still trying to pick up the pieces. It all started with a fixer-upper we found online, a 1950s ranch house described as having good bones. The photos showed peeling wallpaper and a sagging porch, but the price was right, and we had renovated our first condo ourselves, so we were willing to take a chance. We scheduled a tour without realizing that the homeowner was Marissa Cole, a local parenting blogger with a huge following. She insisted on being present during the walkthrough, which felt a bit odd at the time, but we assumed she was simply being protective. She followed us from room to room with her arms crossed while we casually pointed out that the kitchen cabinets were rotting, the floors sloped toward a cracked foundation, and what was called vintage charm was really just decades of neglect. My husband, who works as a corporate lawyer, mentioned that the structural issues might cost around $50 to fix. I even joked that the floral wallpaper in the bathroom looked like something out of a horror film, though Marissa didn't laugh. A few days later, my husband's boss called him into a glass-walled conference room after a video had been sent to the firm's HR department. It turned out that Marissa had edited a recording of our tour to make it look as if we were sneering at her so-called humble home. The video cut together clips of us criticizing the house with close-ups of her trembling hands, and a caption accused us of mocking a single mother's hard work. Of course, the video conveniently left out the fact that she had mentioned buying the house as a flip and listing it for twice what she had paid. By noon that day, her followers had submitted over 50 complaints demanding that my husband be fired. His boss, an uncompromising woman who had mentored him for years, mentioned that an internal investigation was underway, sounding almost resigned as if she'd seen this kind of drama before. We ended up hiring a lawyer that same week. She explained that while the video was manipulated and stripped of context, defamation cases are a nightmare because you have to prove malice and not just that something isn't true. Our savings quickly dwindled under the weight of mounting legal fees. We had to put our home search on hold, cancel our gym memberships, and even forego date nights. Friends advised us to drop the whole fight. One friend argued that Marissa was a narcissist with a strong online presence and that we were basically letting her win by obsessing over the issue. Yet, giving in would have meant admitting we'd done something wrong, which we hadn't. Marissa refused to entertain any settlement offers and instead published a newsletter about protecting honest homeowners from predators, casting herself as a martyr. As a consequence, my husband's corporate clients, who had once admired his dry wit, gradually started shifting to other attorneys, and his caseload dwindled. I even caught him at 3 a.m. one night, hunched over his laptop and scrolling through Zillow listings for apartments, his jaw set tight. Then there were the reviews. A couple from a neighboring town had toured a condo Marissa had listed the previous year. They had described the plumbing as sketchy, and suddenly their faces appeared in another video accusing entitled millennials of disrespecting family homes. The post was taken down after a week, but not before the wife lost her teaching job. I showed our lawyer, who subpoenaed Marissa's raw footage, Malm, only to have her legal team claim that the files had been corrupted during a system update. Naturally, I started losing sleep, replaying the tour over and over in my mind and wondering if we had said something cruel. Were there moments when I might have rolled my eyes, or when my husband might have done so? My own boss noticed the dark circles under my eyes, docked my bonus, and warned me that things would only get worse if I didn't focus. At the grocery store, I even ran into Marissa's husband near the cereal aisle. He muttered something about how she had done this before, and then quickly disappeared, almost as if he was trying to avoid any further explanation. A restraining order arrived the next week. Marissa claimed that our lawsuit amounted to harassment and even insisted that we had threatened her during the tour. The mediator, looking tired with a coffee stain on his tie, suggested that we apologize and simply walk away. Marissa sat across from us with a smile that made it clear she believed she had already won, and my husband's hands trembled on the table as we left without making any decisions. Sometimes I wonder if we're just too stubborn, or maybe even foolish. Pride is a luxury when you're down to one income, but giving in would mean letting her rewrite our story entirely. Last night, I found my husband staring at his laptop in the early hours while watching the video again, remarking that we ended up sounding like jerks. The edited version certainly made us seem that way, but somewhere in there lay a grain of truth. Right now, it's 2 a.m., and our lawyer says that the corrupted files might lead us to a dead end. Meanwhile, Marissa's followers continue to call his firm. I'm sharing this because I need to believe that someone out there understands that this isn't just about a house or money, it's about who gets to control the truth. We're not heroes, we're simply exhausted, and honestly, we have no idea what happens next. Now for the first update. 3 weeks since mediation, and I'm not sure which is thinner, our bank account or my grip on sanity. The last time I posted, we were still naive enough to think the worst was behind us. Turns out, the worst has a way of multiplying. After mediation failed, Marissa's followers bombarded my husband's firm with fake Google reviews. 1-star ratings piled up overnight, accusing him of being elitist and unethical. His suspension went from temporary to indefinite. The firm's HR director, a guy who once joked about hiring my husband as his daughter's godfather, now avoids eye contact in the elevator. I didn't realize how much of his identity was tied to that job until I found him sitting in our parked car after work, gripping the steering wheel like he was trying to strangle it. We scraped together money to hire a forensic analyst. She confirmed that the video had jump cuts, proving it was edited, and made it clear that the original audio was missing, as though it had been deliberately wiped. The judge dismissed the evidence as only suggestive, stating it wasn't strong enough. We had to pay her fee by selling the espresso machine we'd received as a wedding gift. My husband remarked that it was a fair trade, justice for caffeine, but his laugh sounded hollow. Then our health insurance lapsed. The firm cut his benefits, and my asthma medications turned into a math problem. One inhaler costs what we would have budgeted for groceries for a week. I started rationing puffs, which is how I ended up wheezing in the cereal aisle at 10 p.m., clutching a generic box of Cheerios. My husband also began doing freelance legal work late at night, reviewing contracts for startups, but the glare from his screen gave him migraines so severe he would end up sick. I'd find him slumped at the kitchen table, forehead resting on the keyboard, while the cursor blinked like a taunt. A neighbor knocked on our door last Tuesday. Mrs. Lowell, who has lived in our building since the 90s, handed me a casserole and told me that Marissa had shown her the video months ago. In a hushed tone, she mentioned that Marissa had claimed I had threatened her during a tour and expressed disbelief that I would ever be capable of threatening someone. She patted my arm and left. It was the first time I'd cried in weeks, not because of the accusation, but because a near stranger believed us when it felt like no one else did. Our lawyer uncovered a cease and desist letter from 2 years ago. Another couple had accused Marissa of editing footage to make them look negligent after they flagged asbestos in a rental she owned. The case had been buried in some obscure court archive and dismissed when the couple moved overseas. Our lawyer observed that it was a pattern. Marissa inflates sale prices by inventing bidding wars and then smears anyone who questions her. It appeared that she wasn't merely lying, but was operating according to a calculated playbook. The day we found that out, my husband came home with a black eye. Not from a fight, but after walking into a door while sleep-deprived. When I pressed a bag of frozen peas to his face, he flinched and commented that we couldn't keep doing this, though he wasn't talking about the lawsuit at all, but rather the shock of the cold peas. We ended up laughing until our tears turned into the kind of crying that leaves your ribs sore. Marissa's newsletter labeled us as litigious bullies, and soon our apartment complex was flooded with hate mail, envelopes stuffed with glitter, and letters calling us parasites. The building manager even threatened to evict us for disrupting the community. Meanwhile, my boss docked my bonus once again for missing a deadline. I had spent days compiling evidence for discovery instead of preparing a client presentation. When I tried to explain the situation, he stated that personal issues were not the company's problem. That was fair, maybe, but it still stung. The lowest point wasn't the hate mail or the migraines. It was missing the mortgage pre-approval deadline. We had spent months saving for a down payment, and I forgot to submit the paperwork. The lender left a polite but final voicemail indicating that the opportunity had expired, which I deleted before my husband could hear it. What's the point of owning a house if we're too broke to live in it? Marissa's lawyer then offered a deal. Drop the case and she would consider taking the video down as if it were a favor to us. We refused. Later, my husband's colleague, a former mentor, leaked that the firm's partners were unconvinced of his future there. Even if we won, that night, as we sat on the floor eating takeout, my husband remarked that he didn't recognize his life anymore, and I was at a loss for words. Then there was a flicker of hope. Marissa's teenage daughter liked a 3-year-old Instagram post of mine, a photo of my dog wearing a birthday hat. The like lasted for an hour before disappearing. I refreshed the app obsessively, wondering if it was a mistake. But for a moment, it felt like a crack in Marissa's armor. Maybe not everyone bought her lies. Our car was keyed outside the courthouse last week, with deep gouges along the passenger side that spelled nothing, just pure rage. The officer who took the report just shrugged it off, suggesting it was probably the work of kids. My husband then spent an hour scrubbing the scratches with toothpaste, a DIY hack he found online, but it didn't work. Yesterday, we received word that Marissa's husband had filed for divorce. The papers cited irreconcilable differences. I pictured him in the grocery store, mumbling about her past, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was as trapped as we were. Soon after, her lawyer sent another settlement offer that included a gag order and a token payment. We refused, knowing that if we stopped now, she would continue her tactics on someone else's marriage and savings. I wish I could say we're brave, but it isn't bravery, it's the opposite. We're just too tired to keep fighting. The trial is in a month. Some days, I'm terrified we'll lose. On others, I'm terrified that even a win won't make a difference. Right now, I'm sitting in the dark, typing this while my husband sleeps. His migraines have worsened, but we can't afford the pills. The apartment smells like burnt popcorn because our oven is broken. I don't know what comes next, but I do know this. We're still here, however barely. Now for the second update. 2 months since the trial started, and I've learned the difference between justice and survival. Justice is just a concept, whereas survival consists of a grocery list, a maxed-out credit card, and the sound of my husband's breath hitching in his sleep as if he were still bracing for impact. Marissa's ex-husband testified first. He wore a faded flannel shirt with rolled-up sleeves, as if he had just come straight from a job site. When he claimed that she had doctored content for profit, his voice remained steady, even as he described how she had coached him to lie about water damage in their first home. He explained that she treated it as merely business, and I almost felt sorry for him, until I remembered the grocery store, his hushed warning, and the way he had fled. Guilt is a complicated thing. The judge reprimanded Marissa for tampering with evidence after her story about the lost phone fell apart. It turned out that she had used that same phone to post Instagram stories the day after claiming it had been corrupted. The judge's tone was dry and almost bored, as if he had seen this scenario before. When he fined her, Marissa's lawyer shot her a quick, sharp look that made it clear he hadn't known the full truth. My husband's firm reinstated him the following week, issuing a written warning to avoid future controversies. The email from HR mentioned reputational risks several times. He went back to his office only to find that his nameplate was missing, allegedly misplaced during renovations. Now he keeps his head down, drafting contracts in silence. When the first paycheck hit our account, we sat at the kitchen table staring at the number. It felt like finding a $20 bill in an old coat. Small relief, but relief all the same. Marissa's real estate license was suspended pending an ethics review, and her YouTube channel began losing subscribers once details of the trial leaked. I would scroll through the comments late at night, watching her view count plummet, and I hated myself for caring. In one video where she was baking muffins with her daughter, the camera was positioned just right to hide a pile of unopened legal mail on the counter, and the muffins looked undercooked. We later discovered that she had hidden money in a shell company, a so-called consulting firm with no clients. Our lawyer mentioned that this bolstered our case, but all I could think about was the aspirin I couldn't afford when my migraines flared. The judge ordered her to cover 2/3 of our legal fees. When the paperwork arrived, I did the math and found it to be enough to keep us afloat, but not enough to repair our credit score. My husband joked that we could finally replace the couch with its broken spring, though I didn't share the humor. About a month ago, my boss called me into his office for a performance review. He remarked on my marked improvement, but noted that I had been distracted during the second quarter. The promotion went to a guy who had started 6 months ago. I nodded, said I understood, and then spent my lunch break sitting in my car, scraping ice off the windshield with my library card. Marissa later sent a draft apology consisting of 3 paragraphs that dismissed the video as misinterpreted and lavished praise on her followers for their vigilance. She wanted us to approve it, but our lawyer warned that rejecting it might hurt us in the public eye. My husband tossed the printout in the shredder, saying we were not her public relations team. I agreed, although a part of me wondered if an insincere apology was better than none at all. Then I remembered the asthma medication, the keyed car, and the way she had smiled in court, tight and triumphant, as if it had all been a game. We closed on a house last week, a ranch-style home with beige walls and a security system that the previous owner had installed after a break-in. The realtor called it cozy, but I didn't care. At least, the foundation is solid and the locks are new. We moved in with just a U-Haul and 2 suitcases. That night, I lay awake listening to the furnace kick on and waiting for it to shudder. It did not. Although my husband's panic attacks have lessened, he still tenses up at the sight of camera flashes. We went to a friend's wedding, and when the photographer circled near our table, he excused himself to go to the bathroom. I later found him outside, pacing by the dumpsters, explaining that the flash reminded him of Marissa's ring light, the one she had used while filming her apology video. I didn't mention that I had been counting the exits all night. Her daughter left a voicemail on my old phone that lasted only 12 seconds. In that short message, She confirmed that I was right about her and apologized, though the number was blocked. I played it several times, wondering if it was a trap, a scripted moment, or a cry for help, and then I deleted it. Sometimes mercy means leaving the door closed. We made a donation to a housing nonprofit, the kind that helps low-income families identify predatory clauses in leases. The receipt arrived with a thank you note stating that our support gives others a fighting chance, and I taped it to the fridge. It wasn't about vengeance. It was a redirection of our anger. Some friends who had advised us to simply let it go now brought over houseplants and casseroles. One of them admitted that he hadn't realized before how the system protects people like Marissa. I wanted to be angry at his ignorance, but I simply passed him some potato salad. Sometimes, understanding comes too late. Marissa moved out of state, and a realtor friend told me that she is now rebranding herself as a mindfulness coach. Her website claims that she is passionate about ethical storytelling. Although her headshot hasn't changed, she has started using a filter that softens her features. Last night, we toasted with dollar store champagne. The bubbles stung my throat. My husband raised his glass in a toast to surviving, and I clinked his glass a little too hard, causing some to spill onto the counter. We didn't bother cleaning it up. The truth is, I still don't know if we won. The debt remains. The fear persists. But for now, we're here in this rundown safe house, and at least the furnace works. Now for the final update. 6 months since the trial ended, and I've started measuring time in small victories. The kind you don't celebrate but tuck away like spare change. The first full night's sleep, a week without a panic attack, a basil plant that hasn't died yet. Our lawyer called to say that Marissa's real estate license was revoked permanently. He explained it was due to fraudulent misrepresentation, his tone as flat as if he were reading a takeout menu. I hung up and sat on the floor of our new kitchen, staring at the security system keypad blinking green in the corner. It felt less like justice and more like catching your breath after running uphill. Her ex-husband got full custody of their daughter. The court pointed to a pattern of manipulation on Marissa's part, which I learned about when a paralegal friend forwarded me the ruling. I thought about that girl often, recalling how she had liked one of my Instagram posts months ago and how her voice had wavered in the voicemail she left me, a silent confirmation of what I had suspected. I never called her back. I couldn't figure out what I might have said. Survival has a way of making you selfish in ways you don't expect. We used the final settlement to pay off the last of our legal debt. The amount was enough to zero out the credit cards, though not enough to repair my husband's credit score. He showed me the screen, and I joked that we could finally afford to replace the couch with the broken spring. He didn't laugh. After all, the spring had been jabbing him in the lower back for a year. The idea of a backyard garden was mine. Not because I enjoy gardening. I've managed to kill every succulent I've ever owned, but because I needed something to claw at, something that didn't talk back. I planted marigolds because I read they're hard to kill. They bloomed, defiant in a bright orange, and I resented them for it. My therapist calls it redirected anger. I call it $4.99 per seed packet. My husband turned down a partnership at his firm. The offer had included a corner office and a 30% raise, yet he declined while stirring his coffee as if he were turning down a second slice of pie. When I asked why, he simply shrugged and explained that he didn't want to fight for a title in a building that had already removed his name from the door. Now he works at a nonprofit that helps tenants fight slumlords. He comes home tired but somehow lighter, as if he's been shedding armor all day. Marissa had tried rebranding herself as a mindfulness coach last month. Her website featured the same headshot, softened by a filter, and boasted a tagline about ethical storytelling for empowered living. A realtor friend sent me the link with a laughing emoji, but I didn't click on it. I figured she might as well rot in the algorithms. The donation to the housing nonprofit was my husband's idea. They teach first-time homebuyers how to spot predatory sellers, the kind who hide mold under fresh paint or guilt someone into overbidding. We taped the thank you note they sent right next to a coupon for half-off frozen pizza on our fridge. It was our quiet way of saying screw you to Marissa, while also reminding ourselves that we're not just surviving, we're paying attention. Friends who had once told us to drop it now bring over bottles of wine and ask cautious questions. One admitted he hadn't understood before just how the system was built for someone like her. I used to rehearse what I might say in these moments, but now I just nod, knowing that understanding sometimes comes too late. Grief doesn't care about hindsight. Last week, we painted the bedroom with a shade called bleached linen, which turned out to be just white with delusions of grandeur. I rolled streaks onto the walls while my husband untangled the radio. At one point, a talk show was featuring an interview with a lawyer about defamation cases, and the lawyer reached over to change the station to static, an unspoken act that said more than words ever could. We never discussed it afterward. Marissa's daughter turned 18 last month and is now enrolled in community college out of state, according to a mutual acquaintance. I hope she finds herself drawn to a field as ruthless as engineering or forensic accounting, and that she thrives despite everything. The garden is overgrown now. Weeds poke through the mulch, while the marigolds grow leggy and wild. I know I should pull them up, but I keep forgetting. Maybe that's the lesson, that not everything has to be tended. Some things just grow. We opened a bottle of cheap champagne a while back, the kind that tasted like vinegar mixed with Sprite. My husband toasted to survival, and I ended up spilling mine on the counter while laughing. The sticky stain dried and stayed there for days, a relic and a reminder. The truth is, I don't know if we ever really won. Our savings are still minimal, and I jump every time the doorbell rings. But the furnace works, the locks are new, and the neighbors still don't know our names. For now, that's enough.